Hello folks and welcome to our game. Myself Shane Stapleton, joined as always by Michael Verney. We're here on a Tuesday rather than a Monday because obviously, we deserve the odd long weekend as well, Mike.
Yeah, 100%, Shadow. Yeah, 100%. You get to watch a bit more after the long weekend as well. I might as well say it. I'm in sunnier climates at the minute. I believe the weather's not too hectic at home. I'm out in sunny Spain here at the minute.
The weather's lovely today, actually.
Yeah, it would make. Is it actually? I heard it was monsoon.
Lovely,
it was monsoon when I was chatting to somebody yesterday. But you could get used to. If only you could play hurling full time or something out here in this climate. We're actually only about 10 or 15 minutes away from the one and only training camp I was ever on. Was in Benamedina with Offaly, where we trained hard and we enjoyed ourselves pretty hard too as well.
A little bit too hard, I presume.
No, we actually we went across a weekend and we played the Division 2 league final against Wexford the following Saturday. So it's either win that final and, the team holiday was the greatest thing ever, or the training thing was the greatest thing ever. Lose it and it was the worst thing ever and never go on one again. So we won it by a couple of points and I don't think anyone's been on one since. I think the boys forgoed one this year after the Joe McDonough final. But it was all good. It was all good. Once we won, we were... everything was happy. All the money that was spent was well worthwhile.
Yeah, and you do see a lot of teams going on team holidays, and there's probably some teams that were hoping to nearly lose because they're like, well, we don't want to compromise. Or do you think it's a case that some counties, they only fully book it once they realise, do they need to play a knockout game in the league or not?
I think, am I right in saying 2022? Remember Limerick had the really bad league, really bad. Like technically they had to be Offaly to stay up in the last game.
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure they went on a team holiday maybe a week or two after that, and maybe it was booked midway through the league where it looked like a team holiday. I shouldn't say it's a training camp. It's definitely not a holiday. At that stage of the day, but that was coinciding, I think, with the league final that year. I'd say they book it in advance, maybe with the. You know that when you're on booking.com or something like that, where it's like you don't have to pay the full fee until this date and you can cancel it by that time. I'd say there's probably some sort of an arrangement there. Even though with Limerick, I'm sure with the finances that are involved there, if they had to pay some sort of fee, I think it'd be less of an issue maybe than in some other counties. Maybe my own included as well.
Yeah, you might be onto something there. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. There's a huge amount of brilliant items up there, including like these sweaters, old school sweaters that you would have seen the managers wear back in the 90s. So very slick stuff there.
I saw a retro Kerry jersey flying around here earlier on the week, would you believe?
Go away.
Yeah, you never know what you'll see. Do you know when you're away, something like that stands out like a sore thumb, and this one stood out like a sore thumb. It's I don't know, I would call it the Paddy O'Shea jersey, that kind of the classic. Actually, the one I gave a lend to you about 2 years ago that I haven't seen back since, actually.
Look, I have huge plans to get that back to you at some stage. Come here, to the results over the weekend. Look, there was, I suppose, like in terms of the teams that got through to the semi-final, Limerick, there's no shock that they're there. Clare, no shock that they're there. Kilkenny, they'd looked odds on to kind of get there for the last couple of games. I suppose ever since beating Cork, really. And Tipperary somehow ekes through because Galway, despite having an extra man for 40 plus minutes, couldn't get the job done at home to Limerick. So we'll start off with Limerick against Galway. Finished 17 points apiece, 2 points in injury time for Galway to secure that draw. How do you reflect on that game and that result and what it means even for Galway?
Yeah, well, when you have an extra man for that length of time, whatever, we're having an extra man for 20 or 25 minutes, when you have an extra man for that length of time, like for you to be the one that's eking the draw at the end, it really should be you that's powering away, and the 14-man team should be the one that's really feeling it at the end, that they've had to make maybe a couple of substitutes maybe earlier than they would like. There's lads on the field working harder than they would normally have to when it's 15 on 15. So, flip it. It should have been the other way around, really. It should have been Limerick, someone coming on or a free to level it after a heroic display, where it was kind of the other way around, which is it's kind of symptomatic of that general kind of malaise we've seen with Galway so far this year, that there's been some highs against Tipperary. When they were good, they were very good. And the other day they were able, have a little purple patch at the end to get a game, but just far too much inconsistency. I would imagine, if you look at the scoreboard, obviously it's a result against Limerick, but there's so many caveats that have to be taken into account there realistically. And when you're playing with 15 men against 14, even if it is the 4 in a row All-Ireland champions, like, you're the one that should be setting the pace. You're the one that should be really utilising that extra man. And that definitely wasn't the case on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and I'd love to know what the viewers make of this, but I thought the amount of times that Galway had the ball in their own half, because, you know, Limerick do like to set up somewhat zonally. If everyone's working up the field to try and win the ball, we'll say somewhere between the 245s or certainly from their own 65 forward. Not everyone's going to commit forward and be dragged out no matter what happens. So they'll kind of sit back, and we saw how often there might have been maybe just Cathal Mannion only inside the 45, and there could have been 3 Limerick lads play zonally around him, and the goalkeeper obviously very close as well. So unless you put a ball through the eye of the needle in very windy conditions, it's not going to get to him. And I just wondered at times, did Galway have the composure, especially when they had the extra man, to say, we'll work this out? Now, Pádraig Mannion's obviously a really good player. He was playing as the extra man at the back. And I just thought at times he probably went for it is the easier option to go and blast that ball 100 yards rather than be like, okay, I've got a guy kind of as an option out the left wing here, maybe another one on the right wing. Will I work this ball out? And obviously risk getting turned over. But that is the kind of thing. If you have an extra man, you can't fall into the trap of just driving the ball along, because it's exactly what the opposition want. And then when I look at who did the scoring for Galway in this game, I see Gavin Lee, who got 2 points, Cathal Mannion, who got 4 points, and Nyland got a couple from play as well. There just wasn't enough of a spread of scores. So, I don't know, from my point of view, Galway fronted up very, very much physically here in this game, which you need to do. And at times went a little bit over the line. A couple of the hits were saucy enough, as you might say. But I don't think you can do it any other way against Limerick. You do need to get in their faces and ruffle their feathers. In a way, when Diarmuid Burns came in for Colin Coughlin, obviously Colin Coughlin is getting a run of games there at the moment, and we'll see how long he's out with what looked like a groin injury. But Burns comes in and hits 5 frees. I have to say, once or twice, I thought that the referee kind of was buying what was being sold to him by Limerick and gave him a couple of handy frees. And at times, I thought Galway made it easy for them, you know, like putting in a little silly hand. I think Sean Anand did a silly hand in against maybe Will O'Donoghue, and that allowed Burns to pop it over. But I suppose overall, it should be fairly frustrating for Galway that they couldn't manage to get over the line when they've got an extra man. But at the same time, if they had to lose, so to come back from 2 down in injury time, and we keep talking about what do you do late on against Limerick? Do they keep pulling away, or do you pull them back as Tipp had done in defeat recently? So I think there's positives there.
Yeah, just on a couple of points you've made. You kind of have to be the ballsy play when you have the man up is to try play the ball through the eye of the needle. I would say the easier thing to do, and there's way more kind of margin for error technically, is to kind of drive a ball. But Limerick are so well set up that you're probably going to drive a ball into an area that's pretty well congested. But see, it's funny, you won't get a bollocking in a way for doing that, because it's, you know, the maybe more traditional thing to do, and you're not necessarily hitting the ball away directly. Whereas if you try to play a 50-yard ball through the eye of a needle and Limerick turn you over and it's a score, all of a sudden you kind of feel the crowd on your back. So it's definitely something that you have to have practice kind of just ad nauseum in training, really, and have to have practice in a game, I would say, as well, in that high pressure environment, because otherwise you've been there, Shane, I've been there as well, where you can kind of, you don't even really see that pass, because you're kind of tunnel vision, in the sense of there is that bit of selfishness can kind of come into it, where I'm kind of focusing on, I want to keep my place here. I want to make sure I don't do anything wrong. Driving a ball long is not necessarily, or driving a ball long is not necessarily wrong. Whereas if you try to drive a ball 60 yards into a really small area and it's turned over, all of a sudden that's a tick beside your name, and turnover S. Stapleton led to whatever point. Do you know what I mean? And then it's a black mark against you. So it's definitely something, like, I think that's, and by all accounts, and we'll never really be privy to how Paul Kinnerk trains teams, but he seems to put them into these high pressurized environments. And I'd say, remember we had Tom Condon on this show once, and he just said, like, in 2017 they played the Munster league game, and he got a ball and he drove it 100 yards and he thought he was a great lad and nearly went over the bar, and Kinnerk just came into us and said, no Tom, that's not how we do it now, or whatever. And he would have had to retrain his mind. And then all of a sudden he would have been able to get into a frame of mind where in a game his default is not to do that. And you've practiced it over and over and over and over again. So then it's just the thing about, you can't expect a team to do something in a game unless they've practiced it over and over again. Do you know what I mean? You can't just go and play sweeper in a game unless you've practiced it in training. It just doesn't work unless you have, a couple of really intelligent players that are able to kind of pull the strings or whatever. But just on another point you said there, with regards to Galway, at least it wasn't a 1 or 2 point defeat, or it wasn't 2 points down going into injury time, losing by 4. At least they were able to scrape something out of it. But
they left potentially a league title behind them.
Potentially, yeah. And like we keep saying, Henry needs silverware, and I'm kind of thinking with regard, and we're saying Brian Lohan needs silverware as well. Clare in the position now, at least, to give themselves a chance now. And I'm sure we chat about later in the week the whole idea of, like, in a way, with Tipperary and Clare, who wants to show too much against the other when they're playing pretty soon again, whereas Limerick and Kilkenny, I'd say Kilkenny can have a good crack off Limerick and know that we won't play them again, potentially probably to an All-Ireland semi-final or final. So there's a bit of a kind of a caveat to that, whereas Clare and Tipperary, maybe there'll be some shadow box. Maybe there won't be, because both will realise there's a league title 140 minutes away from us, and we'll both try and take the chance that's in front of us.
Yeah, do you know, David Burke was very lucky in terms of, like, he did do a little bit of a slap down. The reaction from the Limerick defender, was it Mike Casey, suggested that he clipped him on the helmet. He obviously certainly caught him in the chest. So that to me now would be, I know you could technically give a red card if only there was a thing as an orange card. It was probably an orange card from where I was looking at it. And then later on, when Adrian Toohey hit Fergal O'Connor, you see, again, it's one of those things where I'm often like, okay, did you make the initial contact with the shoulder, but then your shoulder bounced up to the head? And I'm like, well, whose fault is that now? If you did make an honest attempt and you caught on the shoulder versus, well, you have to be in total control and kind of feel like you came away from that shoulder not out of, you need to be in control of your own body so that you don't go as far as connecting with the head, with the secondary sort of connection. I'm kind of torn on that. I hate seeing red cards, you know that. I'm always saying that. I wouldn't have given a red card for it, but it's right on the line.
Yeah, the David Burke one, I think it was Peter Casey, was it? And it looked like it ever so slightly might have tipped his guard or made contact with his helmet, but it is like, it's a slap down in the chest. It's reckless. It's reckless enough now. It wasn't a flick. It was more like he was nearly trying to bat the ball. That was reckless enough. I don't think that type of a thing is a red. I have to say the shoulders to the head are a big, big no-no, and I think it's something we need to be trying to cut out. I think you have a fair duty of care, like when you're going in. Fergal O'Connor's 5'9", 5'10", maybe. Adrian Toohey a couple of inches taller. Like, I think going into that tackle, you have to be really, really careful. If he's down at all, you have to maybe pull away the shoulder. Maybe you have to put out your arms or kind of wrap your arms or something like that. But I'd be having a zero tolerance on that type of tackle, I have to say. Like, that's slapping down on a fella in the chest. Realistically, outside of a mark to the chest, there's no real ramifications for that for the person that's received it. A shoulder to the head, the ramifications are, they're in a completely different world, really. Do you know what I mean? That could be, and hopefully this isn't the case or there's any issue with Fergal O'Connor, but that could be concussion and that could be out for whatever length of time. Where, like, I just think it's a tackle. Like, if you look at it, and we're not going to compare apples and oranges, but in rugby, and rugby's obviously a very physical game, any contact to the head and you're gone, because there's a duty of care there for the man that's tackling. I find it hard to defend that kind of a tackle when you put your shoulder in around somebody's head or in around that vicinity. It's I think that was a bad one, and if either of them were red, that was definitely a red.
I'm nearly sure I saw a rugby game in the past year where there was a head contact and the referee said that not all contact with the head is intentional, or, sometimes it's incidental. You do have head contact. You go in to tackle somebody and somehow you make contact with the head when you don't intend on it. So, like, I know what you're saying about a zero tolerance and all that, because concussion is just a massive thing, and like CT coming down the line. Now, I think hurling in Gaelic football, probably there's more of it in Gaelic football, actually. In general, I would have said because
you're really trying to get in the body hit. Yeah.
But it is happening more and more in hurling now, where you're absolutely packing the middle, and people are talking about breaking tackles and all that kind of stuff. So you're guaranteed more opportunities for that to happen throughout the games, because there just is more contact. If we're to move away from that and keep getting your comments in here, well, look, let's read out a couple of them. One Trick Pony says, last year, Seamus Flanagan hit Bennett into the head with his shoulder. Media went after Limerick. Discipline, nothing said about Toohey's shoulder into the head. O'Connor on Saturday. Missing an old comma or two in there just to help me with the flow of the sentence, One Trick Pony. But basically, your point seems to be that people go after Limerick. Both are red cards, says Stockroom Tim. Definitely deserve it if O'Neill was sent off for the helmet incident. I don't think Shane O'Brien can really, let's call it. And you know what? Sean Lennon is always in the thick of these things. There was twice, I'm not saying he's in the thick of red cards, but there was twice on the sideline against Tipperary that I watched. He was getting absolutely stuck in and roaring at Tipperary lads and getting stuck in with the ref. He seems to have an element of a wind-up merchant about him. And he's playing quite well now, don't get me wrong. But I'm going to call it as I see it. He seems to be in the thick of it, John, fairly regularly.
Yeah, listen, it's Galway Tipperary. You could poke the ball across between the two counties. Like, there's always going to be a bit of John when them two play. Now, I'll have to watch the next Tipperary game. I'll see who the wind-up merchant is within the Tipperary ranks and be very quick to call it out. But he's a fiery kind of player, and he's robust, and he's in around there, and obviously he's in around that middle area as well, which generally means you're going to be in around a hell of a lot of tackling. A hell of a lot of tackles and stuff like that. You're going to be kind of maybe chawing at that maybe more than in certain other areas of the field. But to me, I have to say, like, I think the Toohey one was an obvious red card to me, and I like the fact. But I just, on the caveat to that, I like the fact that, I don't know, it's mad. His Galway career has been a crazy one the last couple of years. Am I right in saying he was one of the players that was initially dropped by Henry when he came in, and now all of a sudden he's starting league games on the verge of the championship, which is kind of a fair U-turn there, and in a fairly prominent position, a half-back as well. And also, like, with him playing half-back, I just wonder with Shefflin and Galway, like, I don't know how close he is to knowing his 15 or knowing what positions they're going to be in. Seems like it's all over the place, and it seems like he'll go back to what he knows best. But that's their last game now. Basically, they'll be doing a lot of stuff behind closed doors, but we won't really see their best 15 again until they play Kilkenny in the second round of Leinster, essentially.
Yeah, okay. So PWell74 says Lenan didn't lick it up off the ground. Is Sean related to Sylvie? Didn't lick it off a stone, seems to be the common theme here. Mike Doyle, the ref bottled it, simple as that. The week before, Galway were slating Johnny Murphy. Look, it is a physical game, and at times there's going to be John. So I'm not, like, he's not the only player doing it, but I'm just saying that I've kind of seen a little bit of it in the last couple of weeks.
Shane, listen, right? There's John, like, we're not privy to it. That's why it's lovely to be down at pitch level at times, because you hear it. And that was the great thing during COVID. You could hear what was going on in matches. Like, you've been on the field as well. You've seen and heard things that, going on during games and stuff that you would have said to people would have said to you. I'm the same. I got slagged one time in the middle of a county semi-final over doing a wrestling podcast. That was what was thrown at me. And listen, I appreciate you're a grown man or whatever. Maybe you shouldn't be watching wrestling, but that's what I do. But it actually caught me off guard. But I came back fairly hard, and it wasn't below the belt with what I came back with. But it's just mad what can be said during a game.
Yeah, apparently on Friday night, had a challenge match up here, and I was obviously doing a small bit of trying to referee from the sideline as the manager. But what was apparently someone shouted from behind me, "Go write a column about it." Now, obviously that's fairly tame stuff, but there's always these kind of things, and I'm not saying necessarily what Lenan is doing is wrong here. And I think it's important that Galway get under Limerick's skin. No matter who's going to try and beat Galway or Limerick this year, they need to get under their skin a little bit. If they're able to get into their flow, if they're able to sort of get their own tackle count up, move the ball around so well the way they do, they're going to beat you. The way to stop their 5 in a row is get under their skin. And just
on that, Shane, I would say Galway need more of that fire. More of it. And it has to be, there's a balance to it as well. Like, you can't have a lad that's just going around like looking for that type of thing. When he has the ball in his possession, or when he's around the possession, he has to be able to do the right thing with it as well. But you need that bit of fire. You definitely need that bit of fire. And I suppose it's some of that at times, particularly with Limerick, it's a bit unexpected. Do you know what I mean? You have to be able to go at a lad, I'd say, go at him skill-wise, go at him physically, and then that's a little kind of an add-on. And we're not just throwing this at Lenan's way. Like, there's players on every team that's kind of their modus operandi almost out on the field. And you wouldn't know what sort of conversations or whatever that they'd be having with their opponents out in the pitch as well. But it's usually a thing. I remember someone saying it, I can't remember. It's easy to do it at the start of a game when it's level. But I remember, I forget who it was. I think it was a soccer player. Someone was saying something back to them when they were 5 down with 5 minutes to go. And he was just like, it's easy to do it when it's level at the start. It's like, this lad is still doing this now, and they're looking like they're going to lose the game. It's almost like you have more respect for it that way, because it's easy to do it when you're winning or whatever. The lad that stays kind of going, sticks to his plan, or sticks to his kind of, his way of doing things when things are going wrong. There's nearly something admirable in that.
I thought it was strange that Galway didn't maybe use more subs and more early in the game. Like Brian Kincannon came on for Gavin Lee, who'd scored a couple of nice points. But I think there was 3 occasions when he tried to do a simple hand pass and they just hit the floor, or there was a turnover or something like that. And I wondered, is it something to do with that? But to be fair, it happened the likes of, I was fairly ebullient in my praise of Barry Murphy the week before, but I don't think it worked for him so much here. And, again, it was kind of spilling ball and not always under pressure, but the conditions, we'll come back to them. But Galway, they brought on Kincannon in the 50th minute, Jamie Ryan the 57th. Then Darren Morrissey and Donal O'Shea came on the 63rd and 68th minute. I was thinking, like, is Jason Flynn, would you not be bringing him in here? Is there not 1 or 2 other players you could look at? But don't we also have to compliment Galway on performing quite well, even before the red card, without Conor Whelan and without Daithí Burke? And how are you feeling about Fintan Burke playing at full back? Now, Aaron Gillan was taken off, and there's probably no bigger compliment, and he was taken off without scoring from play. Did he get great service? Probably not. But at the same time, Fintan Burke has a good way of just getting the body in there, doing enough, unsettling the man, little half tug, whatever it is, without getting caught for it. So he did quite well.
He's very good spoiler, Shane. If you look at the 2 games, the club semi-final and the club final, like, he did a very good spoiling job in the semi-final. You'd probably say Luke Hogan got the better of him in the first half of the final. He definitely got the better of the second half. He's obviously very good under high ball, which is just a prerequisite of playing full back. He's a big man, but he's mobile as well. You kind of maybe thought before he wouldn't be as happy with him. Had been, 1 of 2 in a 2-man full back line. But I think you'd be kind of happy enough with him if he's on the bigger of the 2 full forwards, shall we say, if he's on the Gillan rather than the Peter Casey. And it looks, I know Daithí Burke was unavailable, obviously, but it looks like he's the one that's going to be playing 3 at the minute. Now, that could change very easy. Galway could start the first round of Leinster or the second round against Galway with someone at 3 and someone at 6, and after half an hour, it could be a switch from 6 to 3, be it Daithí Burke from 6 to 3, or Gerard McInerney from 3 to 6, or Fintan Burke from 3 to 7. It's kind of fluid enough, but I know I'd be happier if they were kind of, from a Galway point of view, if they were nailed down at this stage.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, the thing with that is, I don't know if they want Daithí Burke in full back anymore, because they keep, like against Dublin when he got red carded, he was playing out wing back. I don't know, maybe it's been 31 or whatever. You want the younger man in full back, especially if he's, well filled out like Daithí Burke is. So we'll see how that goes. What else is there worth talking about? There's loads to talk about from that game. It did stand out to me that, when Limerick were at 15 men, like, so, and I'm talking about how they set up somewhat zonally back there. They're not getting dragged out, and Cathal Mannion was just totally surrounded. Even though he scored 4 brilliant points, like, what a good player, and will he stay in there now for the year? Maybe not a bad idea, because he is just, he really has that threat in there. But the likes of Fergal O'Connor and lads were getting on so much ball and being able to walk it out. And I remember at one stage, Limerick won a ball maybe about 50 yards out from their own goal. It was hand passed back to Fergal O'Connor, who ran back about 15 yards backwards, and then stick passed it, I think, to Barry Nash, who hit a long ball up the field, maybe to Shane O'Brien, and that helped set up a score or something like that. And I was like, these lads are happy to move the ball back 40 yards to then go forward. But then when they were down a man, like Fergal O'Connor was left 1-on-1 with Cathal Mannion at one stage, and Cathal Mannion was just like, get off me. I just threw the ball over the bar. And like, it is brilliant to start there in a team that's beautifully set up with so many of the main players around you, as a younger player coming through. And then, it's a tougher test again when you go down the man. And to be fair though, like, Diarmaid Byrnes came in and shored things up so well. You can't give away a freeze from within 90 to 100 yards against Limerick without getting punished.
No, and he hasn't really been on his game, Shane. I would have said, like, he was on his game maybe more in the second half, in their previous round against Tipperary. He got into the game, like, but he's getting there, and he's getting there. And I think come the time they play Clare in the first round of Munster, I think he'll be exactly, or Kylie will have him exactly where he wants to have him. But it's funny, like I would have thought that Cathal Mannion, based on some of last year, that he was the one that potentially could be playing sweeper if they do play a sweeper. Because remember, like we're only talking about the latter stages, last year's championship and league, he was playing in that position. He was the one that was on the ball. He was the outlet back there. Now all of a sudden he's at the far end of the field. Listen, maybe that was only a stopgap because they were missing the focal point that they normally have in Conor Whelan, who it was interesting to hear him even talking last week about how he needs to maybe work on not being allowed to have his fuse lit maybe by certain lads and being able to keep control or whatever. But maybe that was a thing with Henry where it was kind of like a needs must. He needs to play here today because we basically need to replace, not like with like, but we need to replace an experienced player with another experienced player, and he's capable of hitting 4 or 5 in a game, and he did it the other day. And as regards Fergal O'Connor, it was a guy with probably 2-3 years inter-county experience, but his first time really playing league against a guy who was an all-star in 2015, like 10 seasons under his belt at county level. And he's not, you wouldn't say he's the most physical of the Galway lads, but he was still able to brush him away, and he probably should be able to brush him away at this stage when it ended up 1-1 as it did.
Yeah, Adam English was man of the match. 5 points from play, looks like a serious player. And I'm just wondering, of all the lads who could step into the team this year, Adam English, Cathal O'Neill, Donncha O'Dowd, Fergal O'Connor, Colin Coughlin, who obviously has a bit of an injury now. Who's most likely? I mean, for my money, it's Cathal O'Neill. And sorry, now, just to jump back in, I mean, after the game, Limerick GA denied that Kyle Hayes missed the Tipperary game because of that court-ordered curfew, and he's, you know, the sentencing is happening on Wednesday and what have you. But, like, obviously, wing back might be totally up in the air. You know, this time tomorrow, we might be thinking, well, is Cathal O'Neill going to be wing back for the summer?
Yeah, I would say probably Cathal O'Neill is the most likely. That's not a very original answer. It's just like at the minute they have him where he can play 6. They probably have him where he could slip into 7. He can obviously play around in the middle of the field, and he can play anywhere from 10 up, you'd say. So, but like it's not gas to say Adam English was man of the match the other day with 5 points, and you know, if he gets 10 minutes in a championship game, that'll be a vast improvement on what he's been getting the last couple of years. Do you know what I mean? That's the type of position that they're in. But like I'd imagine Kylie was kind of licking his lips after the game the other day, where they've played a game against a team that's put it up to them in semi-finals for the last 2 years at different stages. They played a vast majority of it with 14, and they were still able to get a result. And one of my newbies, who, as I say, is unlikely to maybe start a big championship game, was, you know, one of our best players. So like that's the kind of position that they've put themselves in. And it does look like, and I know we were saying it this time last year as well, like it does look like they're a step or potentially 2 steps ahead of the pack at the minute. And like, are they in what, 3rd slipping into 4th at the minute gear wise? Do you know what I mean? You'd imagine there's a hell of a lot more to come. There's definitely, is there such thing as 7th gear on a car now? Because I'd imagine they're the only inter-county team that has 7. Some teams don't have 6. And they're able to slip it into 7 the odd time when they're able to slip it into 7 when they have to.
How far are you going to take this nonsense analogy? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, no, not much further.
Do you know, one thing though, the couple of head hits, I mean, Fergal O'Connor's, that, you know, that could have been a red card. You've kind of mentioned that already. Seamus Flanagan took it like somebody's side into his head as he was sliding for a ball, or as he was down low for a ball. And then you had Mike Casey taking one in the head and having to go off as well. It seemed really, really innocuous. But I'm just wondering how many concussion type situations are we going to see this summer? Again, it's just becoming such a physical game. It definitely is a bit of a concern.
The time will come, Shane, or really quickly, the time will come, and it's coming, where that sort of a hit to the head will just be an automatic red. Bar it looks, you know, the tackler looks completely innocent. It just, I don't know. I just think there's a time is going to come very, very soon where you just have to be really careful. Does that mean shoulders will come out of the game? Like, you don't want that, but like, you don't want lads being absolutely poleaxed like that either. And that's, like, I've seen it happen. It seems to happen once or twice in nearly every game at this stage. And that's not really good enough either.
Yet no one seems to blink an eye with the amount of chopping that's going on. You know, like if you go down to rise a ball, whatever, the amount of lads coming in chopping straight across you, and it doesn't seem to be blown at all. Now, at club level, it definitely is more so, because as soon as you hear the sound of hurley on hurley, it's going to be a free. Whereas, I don't know, maybe referees just can't hear it as well, because the crowds around them just make it too noisy. What about Kilkenny then over the weekend? They ended up beating Waterford at Walsh Park, 18 points to 2-9. Kilkenny were 5 points behind, which sounds a little bit like that Offaly game, that we talked about a few weeks ago, down by 6 at half-time. They were 5 behind in this game. But I suppose the positive, when you look at it that way, is that they came from behind and won again. So that's very good from their point of view. It means that they've obviously got a league semi-final to look forward to. Can you look forward to a game against Limerick? I don't know. But either way, they got a win, and Waterford's rotten run continues.
I wonder, even TJ being back, was there, with the chance that they're going to be playing Limerick in the semi-final, there was a lot of doubt maybe after last year's league final. Remember how poor Kilkenny were that day, and Limerick kind of blew them away, just kind of going through the motions, really. I wonder, there was obviously a great chance that we're going to be in the league semi-final. Did TJ even go to Derek Ling and say, listen, I want to get him come back, I want to get game time under my belt? Same probably with Paddy Deegan as well. But they're going to a position now where, it's a ropey enough position. Kilkenny aren't going particularly well. Limerick are going tipping away fine. There is a lot of, there's a lot of talk down north side, that they're not playing particularly cohesively, that maybe there's a bit of disharmony flying around as well. And that could be absolute nonsense. And more than likely, it probably is. What was said to me was just that they wondered whether it was a happy camp, and it's an easy thing to throw out when maybe things aren't going that well. But they need to produce something at the weekend. They can't probably feed that narrative, and it could be a completely false narrative. But they don't want to suffer, a double digits defeat to Limerick at the weekend. After what's probably been a bit of a stop-start league campaign, you'd have to say. That Cork game, had they produced what they produced in the first 25 minutes against Cork, and won well, you're kind of thinking they'd be in a happy place. But it's been 25 minutes that they were good. They weren't great for the rest of it. They were brutal by all accounts in the first half against Offaly. So you're coming into a position. I remember, was it 2019 when Limerick kind of blew Kilkenny away in Nolan Park in a league game? You can't, when you're playing whatever about anybody else, you have to be at a fair level against Limerick. You're just going to have to get up to a fair level, and if they don't, they run the risk of suffering a defeat that would put them back. And they don't have much credit in the bank this year. Do you know what I mean? If you've played really well up until this point and you suffer a 7 or 8 point defeat, that's one thing. But if you've played poorly, got the odd result, as they did against Waterford, and they did against Cork, then you suffer an 8 point defeat, and maybe certain lads aren't happy or whatever, it just kind of feeds into it. So they're going to have to produce something. They're going to have to produce something at the weekend.
I just looking at Waterford, it's not like we always want to come down hard on them, but this is 2 seasons now, 2 league campaigns, and the games that they've won so far, none would be against teams that are going to be challenging for the All-Ireland Championship, and none are, it's Laois, it's Offaly, and Antrim are the 3 wins that they've had, and Antrim are the only team that are operating the Liam McCarthy this year. Last year was 1 win from 4 championship games, and good performance in spells against Limerick the first day out, even though, we were kind of critical of some of the positioning of the players. Beat Tipperary in the last game, and won that game and on merit, and they were definitely the better team that day. But outside of that, at what stage, that's 4 wins from 14 competitive outings. And we'll see them now how they go the first round against a Cork team that's moving pretty well in the Munster Championship. We won't see either of those teams between now and then, because of course they're both finished with their league campaign. And I was just okay, we see them scoring 2-9 at the weekend. And some of the games I'm watching them, I'm they don't even look like scoring. They don't have enough players up the pitch. Desi Hutchinson started this game and scored 1-1. So that's a positive. They have talent coming through, the Fitzgeralds, But I just thought their average scoreline this year in the league against the teams that are going to be in the Liam McCarthy. I'm just going to leave out Offaly just for the sake of this. And I know you're an Offaly man, but they're not competing in the Liam Mac this year. Yeah. They've averaged 117 from their 4 games against the Liam McCarthy teams. And they've conceded on average 120. It's just not enough. 120, when you look at that Limerick team putting up the equivalent of 30 points in a lot of games, it's just not going to get it done.
No, and routinely putting up 30 points. That's the thing. Like, not playing particularly well and not looking like they're going to get to 30 points, and then all of a sudden motoring there within 15 minutes near the end of the game. Like, I only saw the highlights of this game, but when you see 2-9, you're just like, you are taken aback. When you don't hit double digits of points, like 2-9 is not even a half-time tally in modern hurling. And obviously the caveat of conditions, and it's funny, we're talking about time of the year and we're only like a month away from championship realistically, but that sort of thing just won't cut the mustard. And Davy has put the pressure on himself now, where he just said, don't judge us on league, judge us on championship. And if the championship performances aren't up to scratch, like if they don't get that result, like so much hinges on that first result against Cork. It really, really does. From a Waterford point of view in particular, from a Cork point of view too. But if they're on the back foot without a win against, a fellow team, should we say, last year, it didn't get out of the top three. That didn't make the top three. Their games, theoretically anyway, are only going to get harder from then on in. So they need to get something out of that first game. And you would be a bit worried. You would be little bit worried now. I'd be the same as you. The times I've seen them, you are kind of wondering, yes, they're taking lots of shots. Are they high percentage shots? And I know Davey always goes back to say, we hit 20 wides or whatever. I wouldn't be shooting from 10 of those shots. And Limerick wouldn't shoot from 10 of those shots, as would plenty of other kind of marquee kind of teams. So I don't think they can just fall back on that. They're not getting themselves in those, how should we say, like those kind of gimme positions where you're 65 yards out and you're within the ball stopper width. Do you know what I mean? Where you should be scoring 9 times out of 10. They're not putting themselves in those types of areas of the pitch. They seem happy enough to shoot from distance. And yeah, I'd be kind of, I'm no clearer about where Waterford are now as I was before the league started. And to be fair, there's a few teams that are in that position. And like even the crowd in Walsh Park the other day, I think it was 2709. Like that's just for
2907.
Yeah, okay. Thereabouts. It's still like Kilkenny coming to town, your nearest rivals coming to town. It doesn't look like the people are speaking with their feet at the minute. And they didn't have games in Walsh Park last year. They have them in Walsh Park this year. Will it be a big cauldron like it has been in the past? I probably have my doubts. I don't know if people are invested in the way Waterford are playing at the minute.
Okay, well, the scorers for Kilkenny in the game: TJ Reid, he scored 8 frees, Owen Cody scored 3, Luke Hogan and John Donnelly 2 apiece, Billy Ryan, Kevin Blanchfield and Martin Keown, they scored 1. Desi Hutchinson 1-1, Shane Bennett 4 points, 3 were frees, Patrick Curran with a goal, Patrick Fitzgerald, Jack Prendergast, Mark Fitzgerald and Jamie Barron got a point each. And significant news for Kilkenny, who started 10 of their All-Ireland team last year, which would make you think they'll go fairly bald-headed for the league semi-final against Limerick, is that Mikey Butler went off injured after 11 minutes. Now, from a Kilkenny point of view, you'd be hoping that that's just precautionary, but not ideal at all. Okay, we'll move on to the next.
Just on that, Cheno, as well.
Yeah.
Like I've always said to you, cornerbacks are a scarcity, and Kilkenny are the same as any other county. They don't have a hell of a lot of them in reserve. Like, who exactly is going to slip in there? One lad that would have played cornerback last year is Pádraig Walsh, who's retired. If Mikey Butler were missing, like Dara Corcoran wouldn't be a natural cornerback. Like, it'll run down through the subs there. They don't jump out at you. So, like, that's definitely one player they really, really need. And they probably, as regards like picking up a marquee player on the opposition side, he's a player that they can't really do without. Conor Delaney there, Boom says, he's more of a central man. I don't think you'd be wanting him on a 2-man full backline, realistically, being honest with you. They're not jumping out as options now. So whatever sort of an injury, hopefully it's not too serious, because they need him.
Yeah, okay. Offaly came up a little bit short against Clare. A much changed Clare team, it must be said. And a couple of stoppage time frees from David Reedy broke your hearts there. But overall, look, league is done now. How are Offaly feeling about this thing? Johnny Kelly was a bit frustrated with some of the frees, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's been a brilliant league campaign, Cheno, to be honest with you. They were really competitive at Waterford until the Leon Fox sending off, and they got themselves back into the game after conceding a really a juvenile goal, I would say, in the first half. They were brilliant against Wexford. Probably should have won the game. They were brilliant for the first maybe 40 minutes against Kilkenny. Maybe faded away, or maybe Kilkenny came into it. They were blown away against Cork, and unfortunately, that's the sort of result you will have. And they were very, very competitive with Clare, and easily could have got points. So, like, would I have thought that Offaly would end up with any points on the scoreboard or on the table at the end of this league campaign? Probably not. They ended up with 1. Could have easily had 2 or 3. And if you take the Cork game out, and I know you can't really do that, but if you take the Cork game out, the average defeat, what are you looking at? Wexford was a draw, Clare was a point, Waterford was, I think, 7 in the wind up, and Kilkenny was 7 in the wind up as well, 7 or 9. Like, they're all lower than double digits. You're averaging out around 4 or 5. So I would take plenty of heart, but as I've said to you before, like, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to come out of McDonagh. That doesn't even guarantee that they're going to get to a McDonagh Cup final. But as regards long term, Dan Ravenhill got exposure, Cottle King got exposure, Mark Troy, Adam Screeney, probably a little bit sooner maybe than I would have liked. But they've all swam at different stages, which is encouraging. I would say hugely encouraging league campaign, best Division 1 campaign we've had in a long, long time. And
do you feel that is the mood around the county positive also?
Yeah, mood is pretty good. Yeah, Shane, there's a great buy-in with that crop of young fellas from the last couple of years. There really is a massive kind of buy-in with them, because it just looks like they're a bit different, and it looks like they're bringing that mentality even to older lads that have been around the senior panel for a long time. So I would say encouraging. I'm kind of looking, what are we now? I'm looking at 2027, 2028, realistically. But they're doing a lot better now than I would have expected. Anything like that is a bonus at this stage, definitely.
Alan Connolly's after scoring his second hat-trick in a row, and not particularly impressive from Wexford in their own home ground to be beaten 321 to 115, and the game was completely done at half-time. But, you look at these forward options, and actually I'll extend this conversation to the backs as well, but, like, the options in attack for Cork: Declan Dalton, Seamus Hannity, Brian Hayes, Patrick Horgan, Alan Connolly, Shane Barrett, Shane Kingston, Conor Lahan, Jack O'Connor, Sean Toomey, Robbie O'Flynn, Robbie Cotter, Ben Cunningham. That's an insane amount of options. Then midfield, look at Dara Fitzgibbon, look at Luke Mead, half backline then. Robert Downey's been brilliant, and he's been so good. Kieran Joyce, put Mark Coleman in there somewhere. I feel like I'm definitely forgetting someone really obvious in the half back line. Micheál Mullins is another lad that we've kind of liked. Owen Downey, Damien Cahalane, Sean O'Donoghue, O'Leary Hayes. They really do have serious options.
Yeah, I'm kind of coming around to the point of view of that. And Pat Ryan and he said it all along, in fairness, that he's played the longer game, didn't look like he was too worried about the league, knew that maybe the back end of the league was when they need to produce results to make sure that they were in 1A for next year. They've achieved that. They have a nice long break now. They finished the league on a fair high. They've won their last 3 games. They were beaten by Kilkenny by a score, and they were beaten first time out as well, weren't they? But they're in the position that they need to be in. They have the guts of a month to get ready for that Waterford game. And yeah, I'm kind of coming around to the fact that most of their players back on the pitch now as well. All those options that maybe they were shorn of at different stages throughout the league, they look to be in a decent spot now. And even I'd say the mood on Lee's side is fairly decent now as well, because they finished the league on the high. And I think of all the positions to be in, I think this is probably the ideal one. They finished with 3 wins. They're in 1A for next year. They don't have any more games. I'd say Pat Ryan, anything he wants to know or learn will be done internally, and that's probably the way he wants it at this stage.
And there's a couple of other places players I didn't even mention. Brian Roach has been quite good when we've seen him the last couple of years. Tim O'Mahony is obviously a brilliant hurler. There's another player as well that I should have mentioned, Tommy O'Connell, arguably one of their best players in the entire league. But I would say from a Wexford point of view, this has got to be, if you've got an unbeaten run, especially a new manager in, you want to keep that going as long as possible. And to concede the equivalent of 30 points and lose by 12 at home, that's got to sting a little bit for Keith Rossiter.
Yeah, this has kind of been a bit of a team, though, the last couple of years. Remember, they were unbeaten throughout the Division 1 2022, and then Waterford came and gave them a right pummeling in Nolan Park. I think they conceded 5 goals the same day. And that was after coming back from getting a fair hammering in the Walsh Cup final and then beating Limerick the week after. It's kind of been probably a bit of a theme the last couple of years, but it's a fair way for your unbeaten run to end.
And they scored just 1-5 from play.
Yeah, that's probably a little bit worrying as well. But there's probably a decent cohort of boys coming back in that have been on the sideline for a good while, getting a bit of game time into lads. I don't think Keith Rosser will be too worried, and I think one of our viewers had it fairly right. The Cork kind of style, and if Cork are moving pretty well, probably doesn't match up particularly well with Wexford, I'd say, at the minute. But I think Keith Rosser will look at the league as a whole, and probably the Walsh Cup as a whole as well, and he'll be fairly happy, and he'd probably just have to chalk that one down to experience. But it is one on home side that you wouldn't have expected, because they've generally, I'm saying that Westmeath did beat them on home side in the Leinster Championship last year, but they generally put up fair resistance down there.
Yeah, there's an interesting comment here from Adrian McGrath. This is reflecting back on Clare against Offaly. And he said, have to be realistic about that Clare game, Verney. 6 points up against the Clare team with a collection of players mostly vying to get on to 26 and in some cases trying to survive the panel cut that's coming.
I'd be totally realistic about it. Of course, they were playing a league game, and they were, pretty much qualified. They weren't going to. It was going to be more a lot of guys getting chances. But a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have been competitive with, really competitive with even a Clare team or a Limerick team or whoever it is, with lads floating around the 26 been playing. So to me that it's all progress. I'm the most realistic Offaly man out there, I'd say, at the minute, to be honest. That's why I'm throwing it 3 or 4 years down the line. And that's why I kind of know that results like the Cork result are going to come. That's going to happen again next year, hopefully to a lesser extent. And it might happen the year after again. But generally, if you look at the league as a whole, across the 5 games, 4 of them have been pretty encouraging. One of them is probably, a realistic eye-opener. But that's, you can perform maybe to a decent level 80% of the time, and then there's always the possibility that you get that type of result. So don't worry, there's plenty of realism, Adrian.
I wouldn't be the sort of lad to lord it over you if I got something right and you got something wrong. But last week, you were saying Westmeath would beat Dublin, and I absolutely dismissed it out of hand.
Did I say that?
You did.
Jesus, right, okay.
Yeah, well, look, I was at the game. It finished up Dublin 2-22, Westmeath 15 points. And look, the turning point of the game, well, it wasn't necessarily totally the turning point because Dublin were controlling the game anyway. But there was a red card for Aaron Craig, wing back, on 33 minutes. And Donald Burke, who's not that long back, he's probably played 2 and a bit games since returning from a really long-term hamstring injury. He was cutting inside Aaron Craig, and Craig planted the feet, and he drove his shoulder at Donald Burke, caught him in the head, and he had to go. Like, there was no doubt about it. Referee Michael Kennedy, he was in no doubt and issued the card. Now, as the second half went on, Westmeath struggled to create chances. Fergal Whiteley scored a goal, and Keane O'Sullivan got a goal with the last puck of the game, which obviously made it look a bit worse than it was. But 13 points, it's not too far off a fair reflection of the game. And I look at the players for Dublin who did quite well, and they were just fairly economical throughout. They weren't unbelievable. Who played well? James Madden did quite well, and obviously you see an extra man at the back being used well. And James Madden, he's been around for a few years. He knew when to get himself into a position and strike over a few points from out the field. So he did quite well from that point of view. Conor Donoghue was kind of the spare man at the back. He did quite well. Paul Crummy and Danny Sutcliffe, they hit 3 points each. Brian Hayes got a couple. Jake Malone got one. So there was plenty of players who played quite well. It was a bit of a workmanlike performance. And look, obviously, I'd be called out for bias towards the likes of Jake Malone and Sean Brennan, but Sean Brennan's puckouts were brilliant. But there was definitely times when I felt like, you're wondering, why are Dublin a little bit behind when it comes to some of the top teams? The amount of unforced errors or little spills or just basic errors, that's the stuff that's letting them down a little bit. And I know there's that turnover of the panel a lot, so you have to get lads up to the next level, but that frustrated me watching them. But I did speak with both managers after the game, Micheál Donoghue and Joe Fortune, so I might just play that. That'll be about 4 or 5 minutes here, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about it. Good win. What do you think?
Look, it was job done. I think created a lot of chances again in the first half and didn't take them, which was frustrating, but as I said, job done, and we move on.
Yeah, Donald, is he okay after?
Yeah, he took some hit, like it was some hit to the head there, so we have to mind him for the next couple of days and see where he is tomorrow. But yeah, it was a big hit.
Yeah, a bit frustrating because you probably want to get game time into him after being out.
Yeah, he's been out for so long, and he's worked really hard himself and with the medical team to get back. So it was unfortunate. Like he's watched two and a bit games under his belt, but look, we've 5 weeks now to work really hard, and that's the aim now for both himself and the group.
Yeah, like decent recovery after, obviously wasn't great against Limerick. You were hoping for a bit better, but like good recovery.
Yeah, but I think for us, like I think in every game that we played, we periods where we done an awful lot right and created chances and maybe just didn't take them, and the execution was off. Like so, similar enough to the last day. There was elements of the game that we were happy with, and today game created a lot again, but still a lot to work on.
Yeah, and like I suppose April 21st now. You've a bit of time to build, get a few bodies like Owen, like Paddy Doyle. Would they be okay soon enough?
Yeah, that's the hope that those boys will be back in training with the lads over the next couple of weeks, and we're under no illusion going into the championship. Like we're no different to any other team. You want all your big boys on the pitch. Like so, I said that's the aim over the next few weeks.
Disappointing performance, Joe.
Yeah, disappointing scoreline. I think at the end. Look, we were under the cosh. We lost a man, Jerry. It's not easy going up to 14 men like Dublin athletic team. Look, it's an awful lot easier to find, the negatives. That I can see the positives from the National League that we've had. If you'd offered me this probably 3 or 4 months ago, I would have taken it. We found a lot of young players. Today wasn't good enough. The lads know that. The sending off wasn't good enough. I think a couple of things went against us. I didn't think we got a rub of the green in regards to some decisions at times too earlier on. But Dublin, our athletic team, they probably needed a response today from a Dublin hurling point of view. Which there's a lot being written in the media as well at the moment about where they are, and I know there's pride in that dressing room as well. So look, our performance wasn't good enough today, but Dublin's was, and like I said, they're a proud bunch and they needed to react today.
Any complaints about the red card?
No.
It's April 20th now until you get going, and what's the plan between now and then to get right for that first game?
I think they need a rest now, Shane. Like the inter-county season at the moment is so condensed. Like you hear people talking all the time. Like we've been lucky enough. We've tempered it right to a point where we've got lads back for the right time for the last 2 games on the basis that they've been doing a lot of S&C work, but we didn't rush them in, and we kind of got blooded a lot of young lads. So the next 4 weeks look like, it's like what I said to them inside, competition 1's over now, they're in Division 1 next year. If you had, again, the restructuring has helped that, but we would have been there anyway because we didn't finish last in the group. So the next 4 weeks is going to be hard work. They get a couple of days off now to celebrate their National Day tomorrow, and I think they deserve it too because they put a hard shift in. It's not the easiest place to be at times, and the lads realise that, dressing rooms like that they're hurtful, because they realised they didn't play well today. And when we went down to 14 men, realistically, that took the chance away from us as well. But I don't look. Aaron has earned his stripes as a Westmeath hurler. He's as disappointed as anybody. There's very few times that a man walks past you and says, "I've let you down. I'm sorry." But look, that's sport, lads. At the end of the day, you need breath and water and food to survive. Like those lads are hurting in there now, but in an hour's time they'll realise that they've had a good National League for where Westmeath are at the moment. We've got a couple of new lads to add to the panel. Angus Clark was back there today. I thought he was, he is what Angus Clark is, and he'll add to us massively. We've got a bit more game time into Kilkenny and a bit more into Davy Glennon. So 4-week blank slate now, Shane, to answer your question. Let's see who wants to have the stomach for it in 4 weeks' time.
And just in terms of the overall positives from the league, I mean, you look at some of the players who brought through. David Williams being an obvious one, really good player. Like, what are the positives from the league?
I think, look, the performance against Limerick and to back it up the following week with a performance against Tipp, I think that the young players coming in, Conor Gaffney, David Williams, David O'Reilly, Peter Clark today, like when everybody kind of put the head down, he kept going in the middle of the field. That's a huge positive for me. I think the attitude in the group is a positive. I think the easiest thing for the lads to do, a core group of those players who you follow so much, would have been to give up. We had a great day last year against Wexford. Didn't follow it up the following week against Antrim, and the easiest thing to do was for some of the lads to kind of step away and say, look, we've had enough now. But they've come back together. They're great to work with, Shane. There's no egos in the dressing room. They want to learn all the time, but they're the people who talk about today not being good enough. But we reset now. I'm happy with the National League on a whole in that we got a lot of game time into players. We don't have any massively significant injuries going into the next 4 weeks. But I also realise I temper that with the fact that last week we beat Antrim and I wasn't happy enough because our performance wasn't good enough. I'm certainly not happy about our performance today either.
Yeah, so I think Westmeath can go ahead and have a good championship from here. Angus Clark coming back is significant. Davy Glennon came on for the second half. Like I've kind of talked before about having David Williams with the Freshers. I could see he's a very talented player. And Conor Gaffney, who he also mentioned was with the UCD Freshers last year, he's settled in well at cornerback. once they get everyone onto the pitch, then it's a case of, making that ball stick up top, because they struggled early in the game. And then, of course, the red card came, which makes it more difficult. But it's just getting enough ball up to Killian Doyle and Niall Mitchell, and those lads just have to make it stick. But overall, heading into the championship and the Joe McDonagh Cup, how do you see Westmeath going?
Well, like if you look at the league campaign, didn't start well, probably didn't finish well, realistically. But what was in between was pretty good, and they strung 3 good performances together. And the one I would say that they really put the circle around at the start of the league was the Antrim game, and particularly with the players Antrim were missing, and they're able to win that by 6. As Joe says there, when your pick is lighter and you're looking at, 21 or 22 is what you're always kind of it's the same. You're going back to the same kind of players you're pulling from. If you're able to get through without any major injury, any major loss, and you're able to get some of those experienced players back into the fray, I think Joe will be happy enough. Unfortunately, with the nature of it, when your panel is a bit lighter, there's always the possibility of, shipping a bit of a defeat like they did at the weekend. And they would have been expecting to be a lot more competitive. They would have been expecting to be within 5 or 6, I would have said, based on even performances early in the league. But it's imperative for them to get back up. They're staying in Division 1. That was always going to be the case. But it's imperative for them to get back up into the Leinster Championship. And I can understand where he's coming from with saying, some lads maybe could have hung their hat on, been the part of the first Westmeath team to win a Leinster Championship game against a big team, or the first time ever to beat, it was the first time ever, the first time in a hell of a long time to beat Wexford in Championship. Then you're relegated back to the McDonagh, and it's almost like you're starting again, which is not the most appetizing thing. But it seems like they have everybody kind of back on board. But again, they're not guaranteed to get into a McDonagh final. I said to you, Laois, Westmeath, Offaly, 3-2 doesn't go, and there's going to be one big hitter left out. Offaly were in the final last year and have been the best of those in the league. Laois were in Division 2, obviously. So Offaly performed better than Laois based on league form, as did Westmeath. But could you see Laois potentially denying Westmeath or Offaly a place in the McDonagh Cup final? Of course you could. And they're very stung from last year. And they'll also realise that they don't want to find themselves in that Carlow position where, Carlow competed in the first ever McDonagh Cup final, and then took them 4 or 5 years to get back to the final again and get back up to the Leinster Championship. 4 years, I think it was. So it's imperative for all 3 teams, I would say, to get back up. But one of them is not going to get back up. So, but you'd have to say, from a Westmeath position, I would have been happy enough as an outsider looking in at what they produced throughout the league. When they were good, they were very good against teams of the caliber that they will not be meeting in Championship.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have a big Joe McDonagh Cup this year. I think it's going to be very entertaining, and you're going to say the same for the Tailteann Cup once that gets going and some of the early sort of group games are figured out. We'll move on to the Tipperary victory up in Antrim. So I have to say, it wasn't the most competitive game throughout, and Tipperary made plenty of changes. 221 to 12 points is how it finished. And, beforehand, Tipperary had just about found out that they had an opportunity to get into the league final because Galway didn't manage to get the job done here. So it was a calm, composed performance. Jason Ford scored 12 points, 3 of those for play. Jake Morris, 2-2, looked brilliant. Sean Kennelly, he scored 2 points. Owen Connolly and a selection of other lads got a point. But the reason I bring up Owen Connolly is that I think it's a hyperextension of his elbow that saw him substituted after 40 minutes. And he's really established himself as a player of note for Tipperary this year. Having already lost Seamus Kennedy, I should say, last week to a cruciate, the notion now that a player 6'3" or 4" that Connolly is, physical, good at driving forward, breaking the tackle, if he's out of the conversation for the early rounds of the Munster Championship, I think Tipperary are in bother. And if we went back 2 months ago and I said to you, Owen Connolly might miss Munster, you'd be like, so what? But I think he's very, very quickly established himself as an important member of this team. Well,
it's looking like Cattle could be without 2 big kind of war dogs almost around that middle of the field. And Kendy's losses from, he could even be the floating cornerback at times. His loss for probably 3 lines, maybe even 4 lines of the pitch is huge. The last thing, as you said there, they can afford to be without is another one of those players that's really versatile, probably anywhere across the half-back line, in around midfield, and a big kind of physical kind of specimen as well that can keep up with a lot of these Limerick lads in terms of physicality. That's a worry. And I'd say Liam Cahill could probably potentially afford to be losing in other lines, but not in around that area there. And that's where strength of squad and how many lads he's kind of tried out at different stages throughout the league and even in last year's championship, that's where hopefully he'll bear the fruits of that over the coming weeks and months, where that lads have had time in certain areas, because they're going to pick up more. That's just the nature of it. And you're never going into the championship at 100%. Never. No team will be. There's always going to be. It's just unfortunate that potentially you're missing two lads within what are you talking about? Within 6 days of each other, and they're both in around the same areas of the pitch. And Connolly has been one of the most impressive Tipp players throughout the league. You have to say though as well, I didn't think Jake Morris would be back as quick as he was. I didn't think he'd be back on form again as quick as he was. And he's a player that you'd be looking at, like that he can hopefully carry like Tipp hopes on his shoulders to some extent, and he'd be a player that will take responsibility on board. And him being vice captain this year, I do think is a kind of a big move. It's almost like, here's the responsibility maybe that you crave. Let's see what you can do with it.
Yeah, and you'd wish it was like American football in the sense that if someone was out for a while, they had to be registered on sort of an injury reserve list. So, is Cathal Barrett back soon? Is Barry Heffernan back soon? Mark Keogh has been mentioned here as well. Willie Connors, we haven't seen him. So I'm just wondering from a Tipp point of view, you're kind of in the dark to some degree. Some of the players that did play...
It's funny, Shane, just on that, because I remember the last time I was in Vegas, like all that information is relayed to you at like the sports book or whatever. It's like, it's part of, I think it's to do with transparency, obviously, but it's also partly to do with the betting, I think, involved in these races, that you need to, it's like that you can see a horse's form, that you have to be able to see what players are available to you. I don't ever see us getting to that point. Information is getting less and less in the GA, not more and more.
Yeah, and Noel McGrath, he played in this game, played 56 minutes of the game. Pretty quiet, I would have said. But maybe he's, of course, trying to feel his way back after we haven't seen him so much this year at all. But, would probably need to be, hitting a higher tackle count. Because I'm looking at Tipperary and I'm like, okay, obviously the full back line, your job is to survive and be able to bring the ball out, of course. But anybody from there up to number 15, they've got to be dogs of war, working hard, which is why Conor Stapleton is such a key player, which is why Dan McCormick, who didn't start here, I'd probably see him starting when it comes to championship. Paddy Cadell was very good in this game, I'd say. The amount of times he got on the ball and broke through the lines and set up a clear goal. Well, sorry, he gave the sort of secondary assist, we'll say, for a disallowed Jake Morris goal in the first half. So he broke through a tackle, was being tugged back clearly, then did, a textbook hand pass over the top for Owen Connolly to assist Morris. And they gave it for a thrown ball. And I've never seen a more obviously well-executed hand pass. But anyway, that was the case. And I see, there's a comment in here saying, Shane and Michael, what would you think of Cahill bringing Barrett out the field now that Seamus Kennedy is out? Barrett is very versatile. And I might just take this one first before throwing it back to you. But I'm thinking, right, full back line, Craig Morgan is playing so well that he can certainly slot in there. Danny Slattery's made himself an option. Johnny Ryan's another option. But Ronan Maher's definitely going to start full back. Breen is going to start somewhere in the backs. Brian O'Mara is definitely going to start in the backs. And I was thinking that, let's say Conor Bowe is probably going to be the other wing back. And you're thinking, okay, if Craig Morgan, Breen and Ronan Maher are in the full back line, where does Barrett fit there? Now, we could bring Breen out to the half back line. But I was also thinking, based on coming up against maybe Keane Lynch and how good he is. Even the other day, he didn't score, but the amount of times he came short for ball out the field and just popped it to a runner. Like, he's just, such a good hurler and clever ball player. Could you even look at playing Barrett centre-back? Now, remember against in the All-Ireland in 2019, he more or less played sweeper against Kilkenny and went to town, albeit a 14-man Kilkenny that just kept hitting long ball. But I was kind of thinking, maybe him at centre-back, because the way we were talking about a centre-back last week, we were saying he has to be able to defend. Well, in a way, would this actually work quite well for Tipperary? Play him at centre-back. If he needs to mark, let him mark. If he needs to sit off, he's able to cover the ground at speed, and he's a great touch.
I think all these options come into play if Cathal Barrett has had an uninterrupted preparation and he's played 5 or 6 games. I think very few of them come into play when you've no game time, very or minimal game time under your belt. That's the one thing I will say.
Point.
Like, would you be? I'd be happy, and this just personally, I'd be happy to play anywhere on the pitch if I played 6 or 7 games in a row. I'd even be happy to be out midfield, no problem. Your eyes in, your confidence is up. If you've played very little, I think there's only one place he's playing, and that's where he knows to play. I don't. It's like I'll give you the Owen O'Donnell example. Where will Owen O'Donnell play for Dublin this year? Where's the most likely place he'd play? Fullback. But if he had a load of games under his belt, you've different options. We can play O'Donnell at wing back. We can even move O'Donnell up full forward. The full forward thing is totally gone off the table in my view, unless he's getting a lot of time behind the scenes. And it's the same with Barrett. I just don't see it. I would see that as a live option, and you could play him floating anywhere out around there, or you could play him as a 6 against Limerick specifically if he had a lot of games under his belt. But like, as good as Cottle Barrett is, when he came in off that big layoff last year, like, he was under pressure at cornerback against that was against Conor Whelan, obviously one of the best in the country. But like, you can't. I just don't think. I know I've been in that position where I've played very little games, and you go in and play even somewhere a small bit alien, play wing back, and you're just at sea, because you just don't have it done, and you're not moving as instinctively as you would if you'd load of games in your belt. So I would see him as an option in several different areas if fully fit and with loads of games under his belt. I see him only at number 2 at this moment in time. If he got 3 or 4 Munster games under his belt and they were playing Limerick again in the latter stages, and he played loads of games, could they play him somewhere like that and maybe picking up Keane Lynch? Potentially, yeah. But at the minute, I just don't see it.
Yeah. So, and a lot of it is like, we have no idea. Maybe he's training away and playing training matches and absolutely flying at the moment, and they're just keeping stum at the moment. We don't know. Robert Byrne played centre back the other day. Has played there quite a lot this year. Main thing for him is just keeping the discipline, because like, physically he's well able to move around and all that kind of stuff, but just needs to make sure that there's no rash tackles and red cards, because once or twice that has been an issue.
Just needs to rein it in a tiny bit, a tiny bit. That natural instinct maybe to put the hit in and just veer to the other side line, just needs to pull that in a small bit, because if he does, I think he brings a lot of what Liam Cahill wants out of a number 6.
Yeah, Robert Muldoon says Barrett had a howler against Galway last year, but Tipperary were all at sea. There was great ball going in 40 yards of space against Conor Whelan. I'm not sure who even fully fit would have survived there, whereas Barrett had been out for, 4 or 5 weeks at that stage. Just from an Antrim point of view, they only scored 12 points in this game. Aidan O'Brien, he scored 8. 7 of those were frees. Niall McKenna scored 3, and Ryan McAteer, he scored the other point. Ronan McAteer, I think it was Ronan McAteer, he scored the other point as well. So it's just not a big scoreline. They look very much second best in this game. And, Darren Gleeson's gone through the full league season there without picking up a point. I think that's the first time in his reign that that's happened. And when you consider everybody that they're kind of missing, the whole thing, it's a tough start now going into championship.
Yeah, very tough. To be fair, like, the writing was on the wall before it started, though, realistically. And the Dublin game was the game where they were going to get results. That was where they were going to get points on the board and potentially get a bit of a hop from that. They didn't get anything from that. And it's, rather than getting a hop from it, it's probably taken, a bit of any momentum away from them. And then all of a sudden, the way it works is you don't get a result, and then you start thinking about all the lads you're missing. If you do get a result, you kind of forget about all the lads you're missing. That's just the way it's worked, and like 12 points just won't cut it again. In modern hurling, that's a half-time score realistically, and that's just the nature of it. And it's gonna be tough in Leinster. I know Darren probably wouldn't thank you for it, but like, this is not the position he would like to be in his 5th season going into championship. He'd want to be armed with everybody that he's worked on for the last 4 seasons, and he's just not in that position. And like, it's about the Carlow game for them, realistically, isn't it? That's what it's about, and that's the way it is, unfortunately.
And they've lost, from 5 games, and they've lost them all, minus 74 scoring difference. So you're looking at the guts of losing every game by 15 points. So that's a tough one to swallow. And within that, they were quite close with Dublin, and we talked about how that mistake cost them points there, which would tell you that the other games have had even wider margins if that game was quite close. We might just go through some of the results from the tiers as we go down. In Division 2A, Laois 420, Kerry 119, Down 319, Meath 116. and Kildare 116, Carlow 15 points. That's a significant win for Carlow there. So Brian Dowling's had quite a weekend, especially with St. Kieran's also getting an All-Ireland title.
Yeah, definitely. Without him and his coach Richie Root, that was a belter of a game, one of the best games of the year by all accounts. The college's final, and the Kildare result is kind of after turning things up a small bit. So now it's Carlow and Down in that Division 2A semi-final this weekend, with Laois already in the final. So yeah, like the Kildare-Carlow game was played on Friday, which is obviously a pretty new departure, and the game was kind of turned on its head early with John Nolan getting sent off as well. So Kildare had 15 versus 14 for the whole game, and by all accounts made the most of it. That's Carlow's first defeat of the year as well. So there, John Nolan will be suspended, I assume. Barron does an appeal going into this weekend as well. So Down will smell a small bit of blood there. They beat Meath by 9, which is a good result for them. In 2B then, Derry had a comprehensive win over Roscommon. It finished 231-14. Donegal a big win over London, 226-116. And Tyrone had a good win over Wicklow, 129-217. That leaves the 2B semi-final this weekend between Donegal and Tyrone. And in 3A, it finished Armagh 19, Louth 210, Cavan 213, Monaghan 13 points, and Mayo got the better of Sligo, 212-14 points. So that leaves the Division 3A semi-final between Sligo and Cavan. So Cavan were promoted from 3B last year, and they're immediately in a 3A semi-final, which is big for them, you'd have to say. And I know you know a bit more about what's going on up there with different lads that would be involved. But to come up from 3B to 3A and then be in the reckoning to go up from 3A to 2B is big, because there are big kind of chasms almost between the various divisions. So there's obviously plenty of good going on there at the minute.
Like, think about Cavan. They went 6 years without even fielding a team and only rejoined it in 2018. That's just some change there. So credit to everyone involved, and like Ollie Bellew is running the team there. So you can't help but give huge credit for how they've performed so far this season. Did you list the 3B results? Yeah, Fermanagh 11 points, Longford 7, Warwickshire 323, and Lancashire 317. So some tasty semi-finals coming up this weekend. Mike, I just want to ask you about the football and the stamp that we saw. Cathal Heenan, I suppose we'll call it a alleged stamp on a Kerry player, on Jason Foley. And it just looked bad. So it's pretty clear what happened in the incident. And it's going to be up to the CCCC to decide if it's a stamp and that it's a Category 4 infraction under Rule 7.2 and a subsequent 2-game penalty that comes with that. And it can only be proceed if the referee, in this case Noel Mooney, agrees that he did not adjudicate on the specific incident. But it's going to be very hard to make a case for him to not get that ban.
You'd imagine so. Yeah, you'd imagine so. And that would see him missing this weekend, obviously. And then it would see him missing the first round of Connacht too. You can't look conclusive enough. Realistically, you don't exactly know what was going on between the two players at the time, but it did look conclusive enough, and I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Obviously, Noel Mooney will have to say that he didn't deal with it at the time, which he didn't. So if that's the case, I would suspect there's a 2-game ban incoming there.
Yeah, look, you can't have too many complaints there. David Clifford with that penalty miss, side foot in the top corner, went over the bar. I think we were all shocked to see it.
They were waving it wide, I think, was the mad thing as well.
Yeah. And like even the incident that led up to it, like, could that goal not have been allowed? Sean O'Shea seemed to do a cartwheel and the ball ended up in the net.
Yeah, it was kind of a funny 60 seconds, really. It was all a bit mad. I would have thought the goal was fine. Then Clifford's like really exaggerated run up. I nearly thought he was going to stop at the last second and try and wait for the keeper to go. Then he puts it over. Then the umpire on the left-hand side waves it wide. It was just kind of a mad scenario. I think Jack O'Connor would probably say to him, maybe a little less of just do a normal run up and put the ball in the back of the net or whatever, and maybe a little bit less of the messing. But it was entertaining at the very least.
Yeah, it certainly was. Mayo, they lost at home to Derry. That was 213-315. Kevin McStay a bit unhappy with how his team performed there. But third game in the league where Conor McCluskey has hit the net from corner back. And like you'd think of some of the other cornerbacks, I think Peter Mogan hit 5 points from that position as Donegal beat Kildare. But obviously, he's motoring very, very well. Galway, 14 points, Dublin, 22. There's a real control in everything Dublin are doing at the moment.
Yeah, like if you compare this to 2 seasons ago when they were relegated from Division 1, like things were kind of falling apart. This time last year, they obviously, they got the train back on tracks and go up to Division 1 again as they wanted. But they've looked really good. Like outside of, like, you'd have to say, like, the Monaghan game looks like such an outlier now when you look. Like, it's mad.
Monaghan got down, like, yeah.
It's mad that result even kind of happened when you look at what Monaghan have done since and what the Dubs have done since. They've just been playing on the front foot, way less ponderous. They're trying to break lines the whole time. They're breaking from defence at speed. And yeah, they're really enjoyable to watch at the minute. Shane, I tell you something now, your eye is going red there, and I know how hard it is, but the more you rub it, the worse it will get. I remember we had a championship game on a Saturday, we had a puck round on the Friday, and I got a bit of grass in my eye, and I kept rubbing it, and all of a sudden the eye was closed over, and I had to get this thing to get it open for the next day. So as frustrating as it might seem, and as difficult as it might seem, but I give one of the viewers a free pass to peel you with a box if you scratch your eye again between now and the end of the show. But just as regard the Dubs, no, the Dubs have been brilliant so far, and it's looking like it potentially could be another Derry Dublin game. Has that ever happened? 2 teams will play in the Division 2 final in one year and then potentially meet in the Division 1 final the year after. I'd be very surprised because they've always usually been going back down when they've come up.
Yeah, no, that is quite a turn up for the Bucks. And then like Derek Hanvan, he is looking like footballer of the year. So Tyrone 119, Monaghan 213 there. Obviously conditions not absolutely brilliant. And Tyrone finished heading into the last game of the league. They're in 5th position there, 6 points. They're fine. Roscommon, they're the ones who are under massive threat going in the last day. Monaghan are already gone. But, I mean, Tyrone are starting to show a little something. When you have somebody in the form that Derek Hannivan's in, you always have a bit of hope because he can just pull a rabbit out of a hat.
Everything about that goal was unbelievable, wasn't it? Everything about it. The fact that Morgan makes such a burst to keep the ball in play has probably sensed that. Monaghan have put so many players up and a ball over the top. Basically, like, he's thinking, like, if the ball were to go wide, he'd be looking at long kick out over the top. But he has a chance to keep the ball in play. He plays this pin-perfect pass. And Canavan, the one thing that surprised me about the whole move is that Canavan hopped the ball, because it's the one thing you're told to never do in wet conditions. And he hops the ball and makes the best of it. Like, I've never seen, I've seen drop kicks, and John McDermott was the king of it back in the day. But the drop kick and basically toe poke the ball, where he toe poked it too, was unbelievable. It's one of the best goals from start to finish that I've seen in a long time. And it's obviously only 2 people involved, but it was beautiful to watch. And it just kind of, like, listen, there are kind of question marks. Like, there are still a lot of question marks about Tyrone, because if you look at Monaghan's form coming into that game, it was pretty abysmal, and it was obviously very, very tight, and they made a fair fist of trying to maintain their status, and that was the game to do it. They're goose now. I think they've been up since 2015. But as regards Tyrone, they just need to find a way to get the best out of the 2 Canavans and make sure that they are big focal points in their attack.
Yeah, so we already know who's going to be promoted from Division 2 and who's going to be in the final. So that'll be Armagh and Donegal. They're both on 11 points each after 5 games played. Just in terms of what happened over the weekend, I thought Kildare, they made a decent burst of it. Like, Alex Byrne scored 1-3, and he helped to bring them back to within, I think it was 2 points. It was something like 13 points to 1-8 in the latter stages of the game. But Donegal hit the final 4 points, and, like, I don't think you could have asked much more from Jim McGuinness in year 1, could you?
No, probably not. They're one of the most high scoring teams in the country. Them and Armagh, actually. Funnily enough, and really comprehensive from Armagh to go down. Like, it took them a long time to get up. They've gone down and they've come back up convincingly. McGuinness has come in. Like, there's a lot of hallmarks of his first time around, isn't there? They got to a Division 2 final. The first time around, they won it en route to winning the All-Ireland the year after. He's probably afforded the opportunity to play and mix kind of styles in Division 2, whereas we maybe more cutthroat in Division 1, but they've played a quite attacking style. Obviously it's nothing new or anything like that, and I know Pat Spillane was saying that Mick O'Dwyer was doing it years ago, and that McGuinness shouldn't be lauded for, but they're pressing up very, very high. And they're decent to look at. And it's funny, the parallels between Division 2 and Division 3. The Division 2 final is going to be two teams that are unbeaten, that drew in their group stages. And Division 3 is going to be two teams that drew in the group stages and are unbeaten to this point as well. And you'd have to, we'll talk about Division 3 now briefly as well, but you'd have to feel sorry for Clare the way it's kind of after working out for them, because it's just very unfortunate the way it's after working out.
Yeah, they'd still be in the mix only for that goal was disallowed in that earlier game. But just again in Division 2, Armagh putting up a hurling score against Cavan, 221 to 12 points. That's highly impressive. Louth doing something similar against Fermanagh.
In a big game, Shano, as well. That was a big game for Ger Brennan.
Yeah, 6-17 to 11 points. So that brings Louth out of the relegation zone, allows them to jump over Fermanagh, who are on 3 points. Kildare are gone. Like, they've got 0 points from 6 games, minus 34 scoring difference. But that is a huge win for Louth in that game. So well done to them there. And then Meath, they lost 111 to 115 against Cork. And you can't help but think this Conor Corbett lad is going to be a serious player. He got a really good goal in this. He's a coming star. And Cork, to be fair to John Cleary, having lost 3 games on the bounce, they've now won 3 in a row. So they're upwardly mobile heading into that Munster Championship. Yeah,
and they were in a bad spot even at half-time, or a minute away from half-time against Kildare. Got that goal, obviously, and just Corbett was an interesting one. Like, I remember being at that, it was the first ever under-17 final that was still played. It was still played before the All-Ireland. I'm thinking it was 2019, but I'm not 100% certain. It could have been even a bit longer ago, and he was the one that lit it up. He ended up with man of the match that day, and there was a lot of AFL kind of sides kind of sniffing around. It takes a bit of time to probably get yourself to the pitch, particularly physically at senior level, when you're a bit of maybe a man-child at minor level. But he looks like he's coming big time, and yeah, you can't really ask for any more from a Cork point of view. They backed themselves into a bit of a corner after the first couple of rounds, but they've come out fighting and are in a good spot now. And all of a sudden, the mood music is completely different down there, and it all kind of stems back to, I think it was a last-minute goal against Fermanagh that helped them get a result. And the wheels have come off in Fermanagh probably since then. They suffered that big defeat to Donegal, and they obviously suffered a massive defeat to Louth at the weekend. So, things can shift kind of quite quickly and on a moment or two as well.
Yeah, okay. And I'll just run through the results in Division 3 and 4. Clare 15, Antrim 12, Wicklow saw off Limerick by 9 points to 8. Sligo and Offaly drew. That was 13 points to 110. And it was actually the exact same scoreline as Westmeath, and Down couldn't be separated. Division 4 then, Laois were beaten by Leitrim. It's their first defeat of the season, 113 to 17 points. Longford 14 points, Carlow 8. London, they had a big win over Waterford, 113 to 8. And Tipperary, this game was kind of delayed. It was supposed to be in Wexford, then back in Tipperary, 410 to 8 points. A bit of a shellacking against Wexford. Yeah,
there was lots of kind of nonsense went on with that and pitch availability and that, but a very bad result from a Tipperary point of view. Just something I should have said on Division 3. I'm obviously saying Clare are going to miss out. They're going to miss out on the proviso that both Down and Westmeath get a win in their last game, which you'd imagine is highly likely. If Clare can get a win in their last game, they will end up on 12. But you'd imagine who are they playing their last game actually? Are Clare still in with a shout? Actually, I'm wondering if they are. I'd actually think there's a potential that they could still be in with a shout.
Yeah, if Down or Westmeath slip up, they could. So I'll just
Down are playing Clare this weekend actually. So if Clare win against Down, they'll be on 12 points, and Down would only be on 11. Yeah, so I've written Clare off prematurely there, but they should be on 12 already probably, which is the real sickening thing. But they're still in with a fair shout.
It really is an unbelievable performance from this year, considering the managerial changeover and the amount of players that are gone. That's pretty much it from the show this week. A reminder, the audio podcast is at patreon.com/OurGame, and we'll be back later in the week previewing the All-Ireland, the league semi-finals and everything else in between. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shano.